Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special podcast collaboration with Sledgehammers in the Office and Inside Out Nutrition. So, welcome to the show. We've got Hannah Knoll from Inside Out Nutrition. I'm Thaddeus Claus, Sledgehammers in the Office. And then our guest for today is Brian Udvardi. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, we've been working on getting this. I've been working on getting Brian on the podcast for
It took me asking. Brian said he'd be on my podcast. But then I felt bad that he hadn't gone on yours, so.
Well, that's not exactly what happened. She asked him quite a few times, hey, what about a podcast? I'm like, let me think about it. I'll think about it.
He said, I keep saying I need to be on that.
And then Thad asked first. I'm like, okay, so let's just do this. Let's figure it out. We'll do this all at one time.
Yeah, very busy man. So, happy to have you here. We're going to start... like I usually start with, what's your previous job experience? What are you doing now? And kind of give us the roadmap from all the stops in between, or skip whichever ones you want, but kind of the highlights along the way.
So my job right now, I work for a company called Scout Distribution. We are a boutique craft beer wholesaler and beverage wholesaler. We also do a couple of local spirits and some wine. I've been in the beverage industry about 23 years. I started back in about 2002, where 2002, so I guess about 22 years in here, with Crescent Crown. I went there for right around 10, 11, started off from the bottom as a merchandiser, kind of moved my way into sales, and then really kind of just found a niche and love for the craft beer community, the craft beer industry, and moved into their specialty crafts. Was doing that for quite a few years, and then from there I went on to work for a supplier. They're a brewery out of San Diego, Alpine and Green Flash Brewing Company, and I was there for about 8.5 years, and then I've been with Scout for the last 2. So my beverage career has really spanned just about 3 different jobs with 3 different companies, where a lot of times people just kind of bounce around a little bit.
So what specifically do you do now?
So now, what do I do, or
like a day?
What are my title? Well, my title is key account manager. So working on some local restaurant chains, some groups, putting programs together, doing some things with Total Wine, some other chains, but I kind of do whatever our general manager needs. I deal with a lot of our suppliers on a day-to-day basis. We'll help out with inventory control, new supplier and new brewery onboarding, and meetings before we actually do the onboarding. So that's kind of a tell of my day. And one thing that I love about this industry and what we do is every day's different. There's going to be a couple days where we kind of have some meetings and we'll have some stuff, but my Wednesday this week was completely different than Wednesday last week, and it was different than the Wednesday before that. So it's a job where it's completely different. Everything goes in different directions. You kind of have to just evolve and be a self-motivator and manager of your time.
And how big is the company that you're working with right now?
So we are in 3 different states. We started in California. We started with the wholesaler with Scout Distribution when the owners opened that up in San Diego. We recently sold that to another distributor. So we have a branch in LA doing Orange County, in Inland Empire, Arizona, and then we also have a joint venture with Columbia that is out of Idaho. For us out here, we are about 10 to 12 people strong on our sales force. We have about 7 to 8 drivers. We have a warehouse manager. We also have a accounting and books person who does our stuff out here. So a general manager and a sales manager as well.
So this is a pretty heavily staffed team then.
I would say, not really heavily staffed, because when you look at some of the big wholesalers that are out there, the Hensleys, the Crescent Crowns, they have more people that just do their on-premise than we have in our whole company. When I first started 2 years ago, we had 3 people in Phoenix. We had 1 person that did Flagstaff and Sedona, Prescott, and we had 1 guy down in Tucson. Now we have 2 people down in Tucson plus a route sales specialist who focuses on some of our chains. We've added 3 more people into the Phoenix area, plus a couple more, route sales guy who does our chains. And we added another position up north, and we recently added another person in Yuma, which is huge for us. But in the big scheme of things, we're still a pretty small type company.
Gotcha. You were mentioning inventory, and that's something I wanted to discuss with you because you've got inventory on both sides, right? You've got inventory that's going to go to the businesses that you're supplying, but then you've also got inventory coming from breweries. How do you guys manage the accounts between the 2 parties to make sure that that the businesses have enough, but then also that product isn't going bad at the end of the day?
That's a really great question. Because one of the biggest things that breweries to distributors to really kind of, I don't want to say struggle with, but one of the big goals that you always really focus on is your inventory control. So the way the Arizona state laws are, breweries can't just force ship to a distributor and say, here, you have to take this.
What does force ship mean?
They can't just add 3 pallets of a beer, and if our purchase order says we're only taking 1, they have 2, we don't have to accept that product.
Is that
they just pass that.
For like foods, and that's a different standard?
I don't know about foods with that. But when we take a look at what we're trying to order, and it differs from brand to brand, from brewery to brewery, depending on what your rate of sale is. So when we take a look at everything, we really base our forecasting off of our days of inventory on hand. You don't up your forecast, you always up your days of inventory. So let's just take like Wrenhouse Valley Beer, which is probably our number 2 or number 3 brand in our house. We usually average about 400 cases a month. So if we're doing 400 cases a month, we have, roughly, we don't deliver on Monday, so we'll usually have between 16 and 18 selling days. So if we're doing 16 to 18 selling days, we're going to take that 16 to 18, divide that into that 400, and that's going to give us our rate of sale. And what we try to do is we kind of keep between 25 to 30 days of inventory on hand. So that way, if we're doing 400, we always kind of want to have a rolling balance of that 25 to 30 days, so we have extra product on hand. If we pick up some new accounts, if we go ahead and you're having a big month, we're going into season, because the Arizona is such a seasonal state when it comes to stuff. It makes a huge difference from time to time, and people don't think about the idea of, hey, guess what? We have a few extra selling days in October or September. We had 1 more selling day than we did last year. So you have to forecast and look at that. And then you also have to forecast the fact that something like a Valley Beer, which is a lager, we're going to keep more days on hand because that takes about a 6 weeks turnaround. You do an ale, that has about a 2 to 3 week turnaround from packaging from the brewing process to start to packaging to getting us into the business. And then as we go ahead and we talk about what we have to do at retail, it's really our job as a wholesaler to make sure that we're selling the right amount, we're managing our accounts, we're managing the business for people. Because, the retailer will just buy and be like, oh, if it's out of code, we'll just have it swapped out. So we really do our best. We do a great job of rotating the product, checking code dates, making sure we have the right inventory on hand for each product. And just like I said, every product's going to be a little bit different. So that's where the professionalism and the attention to detail really comes in.
Do you guys have a negotiation back and forth with the breweries that you work with? Is there more of like a formula that you guys work off of to say, hey, here's kind of how our procedures work, so if that works for them, then they're on board with it? Usually,
So kind of before you even get into like that negotiating thing, the way the liquor business and like I shouldn't say liquor. Liquor is usually a little bit different, but we have contracts with all our breweries. So when they sign a contract, we go through the negotiation process, they redline some stuff, we redline some stuff. But generally those contracts are between like 3 and 5 years that we have them, in-house. So we agree to, goals for each year. We agree to, who's paying for shipping, who's paying for out of code, what are, the standards of what we're going to do from each side, because it's a partnership. It's not hey, we brew the beer, you sell the beer, here you go. Those days, how they were probably 10 years ago, worked, but with as much really kind of competition that's out there, it's a two-way street. So it's a huge partnership, and there's a lot that goes into that procedure of negotiating that stuff. So a lot of that stuff is done before they actually get in, and then there's back and forth with a lot of things, in between as well.
Has there been a rise of more of these local breweries that have happened, or have they been out there and I've just had my head in the sand when it comes to a lot of these places? Because obviously you see the popular beers that are on the shelf, but then I know it's probably proximity bias, but talking to you and hearing about the different breweries in the different cities throughout the state of Arizona, and then you hear about stuff in different states, it's part of it seems like, okay, is this something newer that people have had a taste for, that people are kind of catching on to, saying, okay, let's start opening more breweries? Or have these been around and you guys are really reaching out to some of these established companies and kind of able to play matchmaker?
I think we should start kind of like with Arizona first. Over the past few years, there's been a pretty good influx of local breweries that are opening up. The quality of the local breweries has continued to get better. When I first started in the beer industry, it was Four Peaks, Lumberyard was up north, Prescott Brewing Company, which isn't around. Santan wasn't quite there. They came around like a couple years later into the market. And as everything has kind of progressed over the years, then Huss opened up. About 9 years ago, Wren House came into play. Fate did, and I think what's really happened is, everybody's seen the growth of craft beer, and we really kind of in Arizona get our flavors and taste from a lot of San Diego breweries, where the local scene is huge in San Diego, and we've kind of really grown with having a lot of established people that have been brewing beer for a long time, starting to get into that and opening it. And it's been great to see the craft beer community, because it is a community out here, grow year after year. And I think it's just, the local scene is going to continually grow and get stronger and stronger.
Is it kind of like a wine tasting? Like you got the group that just love specialty wines, and then you got a group that really likes just learning and tasting different craft beers, or is that a comparison?
It's so like you have like your winos who love that stuff, and you have your, we call beer geeks, right? That's really kind of the term, that you use for it. And you have your people that are going out there, they're always chasing the trends. It's not as prevalent as it used to be when, I would say probably like 12 years ago, if you did I did a beer event at Broad House in Scottsdale for Arizona Beer Week, and they tapped a keg of, it was North Coast Old Rasputin. 15.5% bourbon barrel aged stout. Only 2 of them came in the state, and we tapped it at 6 o'clock. Everybody was getting no more than a 4-ounce port because it was a small keg.
Wow.
And we wanted to ship, but the keg blew in like 30 minutes because people were waiting. There was only 2. And people were super excited. They would travel. They would chase that stuff. Now people don't chase it quite as much because there's so much better beer that's really come out into the market. But people have gotten more educated with it. And there's definitely those beer geeks, and you said it, the term. It's not drinking beer, you're tasting beer. when you taste something, there's a process that you look at, you go through. I mean, it's just like food. You go to a restaurant, and people do it all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, what's that? It looks great, it smells great, now you want to taste it. So when you get a beer, a lot of times you have to take a look at it. Does it look appetizing? What's the aromas that you get from it? What are the tastes? What are the flavors you get? Really your tongue can only depict 5 things: sweet, sour, salty, umami, and bitter. So whatever you're tasting's got to fall into that. But then at the end, what kind of mouthfeel and what kind of finish does it have on it as well? So there's a process of going through that tasting aspect of the products that are out there.
Very cool.
What's the difference between a craft beer and then if it's a Bud Light, Miller Lite, or whatever that we typically see on the shelf?
There's the Brewers Association definition of it, and then there's kind of the standard. So a craft beer, the way it kind of goes is there'll be like microbrews, which are the smallest, which you'd probably say is like Desert Mountain that's down there, or is it Desert Mountain? Saddle
Cave
Mountain.
Creek.
Saddle Mountain that's down on 7th Street.
Okay.
Down there, and which is small. They really don't distribute. They just have their tap room, and go to like a craft brewery, which is getting a little bit bigger, and then you go to like your macros, and there's a lot of stuff that are kind of in between that, those spectrums, because they're kind of big. But once you go over a certain barrelage, you start moving up. If you're owned by any of the 2 conglomerates, Miller Coors or Anheuser-Busch, you're not really considered, and your volume doesn't go against the craft barrelage. So that's kind of the Brewers Association's guidelines on there. The craft breweries can brew beers like like the Coors Lights, Miller Lights, and if you go to a lot of places, they'll have a light lager, in there for consumers that are going in there. Fate, they carry their local lager. They have their modern pills. Red House has Valley Beer. They have their Big Spill pills, which are kind of there for the consumers that want that. The Coors, Miller, Buds of the world, they make these, light lagers that are really made for, quick consumption, really.
Just sitting there.
Sitting there, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that when it's
The typical frat party demographic that some of them are trying to get away from.
Frat parties.
Shout out to Bud Light.
Yeah, well.
We got like the boat people that or you just sitting.
But see, when you go somewhere, my kind of go to just every day, I kind of say like Sand Beach beer is going to be Modelo Especial. I like that. Right, it's got a really nice flavor to it. It's quick and easy drinking. Mm-hmm. So if I don't have a craft or something at my house, that's kind of something that I'll go to, and everybody will have one.
And then I know you mentioned this earlier, that one of the Arizona state laws with the inventory going to, the end business. And I've heard that there's several laws throughout the states in regards to distribution, and there's obviously certain things as far as like you can't serve alcohol after 2 a.m., things of that nature. Are there any other laws that we wouldn't be aware of that affect the business for you guys, if it's with transportation or anything like that, that you guys deal with?
Well, there's a 3-tier system that has to be followed that is done by the TTB, Trade Tobacco and Firearm, and it's a 3-tier system. So all alcohol has to go from a supplier or producer, whether it's a brewery, winery, distillery. It has to go to a distributor to sit there for 24 hours, and then it has to go to a retailer for consumption. One of the things that you can kind of do in between those is if you are a small brewery under, I think Arizona, I don't know what it is for wine and spirits, but if you sell under 40,000 barrels, you're allowed to self-distribute in the state of Arizona. And people can come to your tap room and they can always buy beer to go there, but you're allowed to self-distribute to some spots. But generally, once you go from self-distributing to signing with a distributor, you follow that 3-tier system, and it's way too. The government wants to make sure that these breweries are registering in the state. They're paying their their fees and everything, and taxes, so they can ship beer into the state. They go to us. We get the beer. We have to put an excise tax on that, and then we send that. Get our pricing in line, and then we send that to the retailer for consumption.
What's the excise tax look like?
I don't know what wine and spirits are, but it's 16 cents a gallon.
So they definitely upcharge just a little bit.
16 cents a gallon is the excise tax.
The government always needs to get their cut, right?
Always.
They're trying to discourage, but it's not working.
Yeah. What makes a brewery a good fit for a distributor? I know that you guys went out and had a trip recently to meet with a brewery to see, like, hey, is this going to be a good working relationship? Are you guys looking at the volume that they're able to do, the price, their turnaround? Is it really just money at the end of the day, or what really goes into when you weigh that?
There's a lot of things that go into that decision. Especially specifically for us. We kind of really pride ourselves on being, the premier boutique distributor that's out there in the market. When we talk and we meet with people and have some potential suppliers, we sit down, we have a conversation, we try some of the products, and depending on what style of product it is, it depends on what kind of category that we go into. We talked to a supplier recently, and great product. Thought it tasted fantastic. It has a place, but for that to sell, they would have to have chain distribution. Arizona is because it's more of an off-premise brand, and off-premise in Arizona, chains are making about 80%. Where when you look at our business, we're doing about 70% off-premise or on-premise, with the craft beer bars, restaurants, hotels, these places where that. So when we sit down with somebody, it varies on what the product is, what their size are, and kind of what their goals are, and how they match up with what we're looking to do, and also how they're going to mesh with us, in our team.
Gotcha. How much interaction do you guys have with them besides, like, the orders back and forth? Is there, like, you talked about you're managing a lot of the accounts. How often do you, once you secure an account with them, are you in contact with them back and forth to make sure that there's almost like maintenance on the account?
So when we do that with a supplier, well, we have a few suppliers that actually have people in the market, and they'll really focus on the accounts that we already have open, as opposed to, there's times we'll go out and they'll open up a few new accounts. And we have a couple suppliers who are really good about it. But in general, they really focus on going to the accounts that we have open, and really driving their brand and engaging with our team, telling the story, because with us, or not even with us, but with craft, it's about a story. It's about telling the story about the brewery, where you guys came from, what you guys focus on, what you guys do. And nobody tells the story better about what you're doing than the people that work directly for that. And they need to be the brewery experts. We do our due diligence, we do everything, but there's going to be little things and nuances of beer and stories behind beer that they may come out with that we don't know unless they tell us.
Yeah. And then you mentioned you guys are trying to be the premier boutique distributor for Arizona. What does that look like compared to someone who's like, hey, we're a distributor, but what would you say differentiates the two of you guys, or what's that it factor?
When we came out here, when Scout came out, I think a lot of the big guys, thought we may or may not have, be around that long, but we've made a huge dent in the market, and it's awesome. And when you look at, between boutique and a different distributor. It's just really what you want to focus on. What are your goals? What are you guys trying to do? And for us, we're going to continually just build what we're doing, stay our course, and do what we have to do. Because you have the larger distributors, and they are the absolute best at execution. They have huge manpower, but as long as we stay our course, and we focus on what we do best, then that's what we just need to focus on, really.
Is part of that taking some of the messaging you get from the breweries and helping distribute, or not distribute, but take that to the businesses that are going to be like selling it to the end consumer, to be able to help them? Because you talked about the breweries are the ones who do the best storytelling. So is part of your job to be able to say, all right, here's everything we have available for you, and then be able to almost give samples of each of those stories to give to the restaurants or bars or whatever?
Well, you have to, you have to be very strategic of what you're doing. Because if you go into a place, number one, restaurants may be a little bit different where you have, let's just say you have a place that has like 6 draft handles in there, right? You go in there and you have to kind of like have a conversation. What are you looking for? And steer them in the right direction. We can't come in there with like 30 things and be like, let's go through this, because their brains are going to go sideways. They're going to lose kind of like focus. We're going to lose focus. So we have to be, in that section, we have to be really, really, kind of focused and engaged with what we're trying to present and what we're trying to go after.
So is it then you listen to what they're saying in regards to the feedback they get, if it's a bar,
from their customers, or
right,
what are they looking to replace? What are they looking to do different? What is their kind of, and that's kind of my approach with just selling in general is, there's plenty of people who are just way better, just straight salespeople. But what I've kind of gotten good is I'm just good at asking questions and getting answers out of people, and then I find somewhere to go. When you talk about some like the other spots, the buyer may know the stories, but none of these buyers are going to have time to talk to the customers about the story. So it's really us giving the story to the the retailer, or whoever the buyer is, so he can make a decision to say yes. That story is not going to go on to the customer 90% of the time, because they don't have time to be like, hey, by the way, do this. Oh, by the way, do this. On top of trying to run a store.
Right.
There's a couple of places down the street that they're really good and engaged in the products, and they do some research and do that. But it's not only us being able to educate them on some things, but also they have to do some education on their end as well.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then this was probably last year. You were talking about you guys were going through a growth phase, and we're bringing on someone new for the business. We're looking to bring on someone new for the business, and I was like, well, I might know a person or two. And you're like, dude, you have to know this business inside and out. It's a relationships business. You can't just like, oh yeah, I like drinking beer, and then step into it. If someone like you've been in it for 20 years, is it a 20-year journey to kind of get where you are as far as if it's with the knowledge, or where does someone even need to start just to be able to say like, hey, here's the book of knowledge that I have to even enter the space to try and be in that arena?
Well, it's I didn't walk into my position there. We have a few new people that have come in. They haven't been in the beverage industry before, but we went through the interview process. They worked in one of the craft beer spots and restaurants out here, so they had a decent background in some beer. They were interested in taking the next step, and really it was kind of like how do their personalities feel? Are they willing to learn? Are they going to take the steps to do the education and ask some questions? It's when we've kind of talked like a year or so ago. At that time, we were really looking for people. I guess it was probably a year and a half. It's like we were looking for people that were going to walk in, boom, hit the ground running, and go. People that had relationships in the market, that had some experience, were somebody that, and even now, people walk up and be like, what's an IPA? Sorry, you're not coming to work here. If you can't have a good explanation on stuff, you're just, you gotta have a good base of, some beverages and things to get that start. And then after you get that, you can teach and you can coach some of the selling skills.
Yeah. So what does scaling look like in the next several years as you guys try and pick up the appropriate employees, trying to work with the correct distributors, and then get into more businesses?
We'll see how it's going. I mean, there's not the overall craft index, when you look at IRI data, craft is down a little bit.
What's IRI?
That's what grocery is. And when
Okay.
you talk about IRI data, that's what is actually scanned at grocery stores.
Okay.
So, overall, when you look at IRI, craft is down, so far this year. What we're doing in this, we're up, close to 30%. Independent craft is about flat. And we'll see kind of how the market continues to evolve over the next few years. The younger drinker is really looking for, some things better. They're also, but they aren't looking for the better for you option. Everybody was on the seltzer craze for a long time, and that's kind of really gone away. I think White Claw kind of came in, took over that, and people have kind of gone away. But it's going to be interesting. I think people are going to be a little more, not the word picky, but I think everybody's going to be watching their dollar over the next couple of years, and they want to make sure they're getting the top quality for what they're paying. People will always pay for great product, but you got to make sure you do that. So I think quality is going to be the number one thing that we're going to have to see over the next few years, and that's kind of what we look for when we want to bring on a partner.
Don't need any names, but to the quality point, do you guys ever have a brewery reach out to you and then you go there and you're like, this is just not good? Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something, where, things just don't come in there and meet, some expectations. And, that's why there's, plenty of fish in the sea to look in some other spots, and hopefully they find a home that fits them, that just may not fit here. It's just like I said, it's a partnership, it's a relationship, and not everything always, is a perfect, fit right there. So,
Nice. All right. Are we ready to jump into a little nutrition part? I've been really excited about this. Yeah. So at the gym, I've asked, part of it is you have 20 years experience, and then you also have fitness background. So I think it's cool that we have both of those combined. So I guess even before I launch into my questions, I guess I want to know, did you have to self-educate, or was there like required education? Because you know a vast amount about the type, the quality, what happens to your body. Where did all that come from?
I mean, I think it's just learning things a little bit over time. Just kind of, reading some things, taking a look into, I think social media has helped out a lot of people where they're getting better knowledge with, some things with some fitness, nutrition, the ins and out, how the body works. I think we're, and just looking at some of those kind of, gets you a little bit better and gets not a good idea, but just, gives you a good insight into what could work better. And then also it's kind of like, wait a minute, you're saying this is bad for me, but the same thing is in these protein bars here.
It's true, because you know the ins and outs of what's
So,
in it. Yes.
So, I mean, let's just take, the most popular low carb, protein bar. I mean, we all know, Quest. There's sugar alcohols in there, which, guess what? In beer, there are sugar alcohols. There. But why is it, they talk about, it's really bad for your gut bacteria. It's hurts that. It takes how many days? I don't even know what it is. But, to heal it. But people can eat protein bars all the time, but there's sugar alcohols in that. Erythritol. Why is that? I mean, it's not actually erythritol that's in beer, but there's still sugar alcohol. So why is one okay for people to eat in fitness and beer isn't?
Gotcha.
Is there a volume discrepancy between those two at all?
It all depends on the beer and how much the ABV is. So like Miller Lite has 96 calories and 3.2 carbs. You take like an IPA, you're probably looking at 2 to 250 calories on there, and probably 18 to 26 carbs that are in that beer. And depending on what the alcohol content is, will kind of dictate. And I've never actually looked at it, but I'm sure that'll dictate what kind of sugar alcohols are actually in there.
That makes me immediately think, I want to know what, I guess I'm not, the bowel movement afterward, because that sugar alcohol, I'm like, this is a business podcast. I'm like, nutrition mind. But yeah, no, and then like bloating, obviously yeast plays a big role if people are, or they got a gluten sensitivity that could cause bloating, but I'm sure there has to be how you feel during it, depending on what the low carb, but
so just like what you brought, you're talking about low carb, like a domestic light lager, some of the low carb beers that are out there next to a higher carb beer. But it doesn't mean because it has more carbs in there, it's going to make you fuller. Generally, when you have something that's going to be a little bit lower in carbs, a little bit lighter in the body, it's going to have more carbonation in there. Yeah. So how many times have you guys, I know you never have, but have you had a beer before?
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to drink a little bit.
Yeah, but you have like a domestic light lager. Right? You drink that, and what's the first thing you do after a few sips?
A little burp.
You burp. That makes you feel full. Carbonation from that will make you feel way fuller than whatever the carbs that are in there are.
And the sugar alcohols, that will bloat you in just 2 seconds. Try Quest Bar. It's terrible. Actually, they are used as like a gentle laxative, or in some cases, depending on how much you eat, as like an actual laxative. Okay, so the RDA has we generalize and standardize everything. So it's just 1, 2, alcohol, nothing kind of specific. So what is the actual, because we actually had this conversation, drink? So the RDA says 2 drinks men, 1 drink woman per night. What is the actual, what does that look like for wine, beer, and liquor?
You know what, I don't know what it actually is. They say, what is it? A glass of wine at night is great for, you to go to sleep or whatever.
What would be 6, they tell us 6 ounces is a glass of wine. And you're like, actually, that's not true because it depends on the type of wine.
Yeah, well, so in a general aspect of what the RDA says and the DLLC, the Department of Liquor License Control, says on those 2 things are completely different.
Yes, that's what I want to know.
So they say that 12 ounces of beer, 1.25 ounces of liquor, and 6 ounces of wine or 4 ounces of wine have the exact same amount of alcohol in it, and it takes your body the same amount of time to metabolize that alcohol out. Which it's okay, well, I can have a Miller Lite that's 4.2%, but then I can have a Fateful IPA that's 6.6. Well, the ABV is different. There's so many with alcohol. There's different proofs that are in there. Bacardi 151. I mean, it's 151 proof. It's why you light it on fire. And then wines. There's some that are 15%. There's 13%. There's ice wines that are up to, I think they go up to 20 to 25 percent. There's stouts, and barrel aged stouts that are 12, 13, 14, even 18%. So, there's what the RDA says compared to what the DLLC says. None of it all matches up because there's so many variants between the 2. And
so it sounds like with the DLC doesn't even match up to reality at all. So there's not really an actual good standard in your opinion.
No. Okay. I mean, and a lot of what they do is, that's what they do when they teach people the classes. More of those classes that they say is more for bartenders, servers, and the managers to be like, okay, you know what? This person's had 3 beers, maybe, is he overserved? Is he underserved? And kind of like a standard idea for how them to take a look at things at the service level. as opposed to, what is healthy for you or not. Because, and how does your body metabolize that? Somebody who has more body fat is going to be able to drink more liquor than somebody who doesn't, whether it's wine, spirits, or beer.
Do you notice a big difference on how like the body's affected with beer compared to wine, compared to liquor? Or is that independent per person from what you've seen?
So I don't really enjoy drinking. I'm not a spirits person. My idea of when I do once in a while drink spirits, it would be like bourbon on the rocks or something like that. But I'm not a spirits, a drinker. Wine, I'll once in a blue moon. But I love beer. I'm in the beer industry because I love it. I love the craft beer industry. I love all those things. So I can really only kind of speak on the beer aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it, I can tell you, like, I'm 47 now. I definitely don't wake up in the morning as chipper as I did when I was like 37 and have a beer or two or something like that.
Yes. I feel like as soon as you take it out, yes, age absolutely plays into it, but your body just gets so used to not having it, then you have it, and tolerance is gone, and you just feel like garbage the next day.
What was it? I think I told you, when I turned 40, I was like, obviously I was doing CrossFit for like 2 years, and I'm like, I'm going to go to regionals, I'm going to do this. When I started training twice a day, stopped drinking for a month, and I went from like 168, where I was like 9% body fat, down to like 157. But I couldn't eat enough food.
Yes.
I could not, literally, I was like, rice didn't taste good. I would have 2 baked potatoes. I couldn't do that. I just went down, I lost weight. I'm like,
people don't realize how many calories they're intaking just drinking, specifically beer. I have a plethora of people who consume, 5 to 10 in a night when they start, and they take it out, and like, you realize the calories of that. Your average light beer is like 100 calories, so they're getting 1,000 calories from just beer. You've talked about the difference of like the quality of ingredients in beers and wines and the way the body's going to handle that. Can you talk on that?
Obviously the body, metabolizes everything differently. And everybody's body is a little bit different. I know some people that have had some diabetes and they had to switch from beer, and they loved beer, but they could only drink wine because their blood sugar level would just shoot through the roof. And there's people that I know that have been the exact opposite, where they were like, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes, but it didn't, affect them, and they could still drink beer. But wine kind of bugged them a little bit different. So it's a proof that your body metabolizes, and everybody's body metabolizes everything, a little bit differently. When you talk about beer, and we kind of go back to, let's just start off with like German beer. Mm-hmm. German beers, can only be brewed with 4 ingredients. It's called the German purity law: water, yeast, barley, and hops. They're not allowed to put anything else in their beer over there other than those 4 ingredients. And when you think about ingredients in Europe and just overall through there, I think their everyday standards for food are so much higher than the USDA organic, than we have here, where, and then we talk about like some, American beers, American breweries, they'll put some adjuncts in there, and all that means when you say an adjunct is, they're putting something else in there other than water, yeast, barley, and hops. It could be oats, it could be corn, it could be rice. But generally with, a lot of craft breweries, and what people put rice and corn in beer for is it lightens the body of the beer and adds some fermentable sugars without adding a lot of flavor and body to it. So you're able to drink that a little bit faster.
Oh, interesting. So there's the science to like get people hooked, or when you mentioned like a Modelo being easy to get mm-hmm. down.
Or, when I go somewhere and there's if their mugs are like ice cold, I'll be like, can I get my beer in one of the room temperature glasses? Because I don't want my beer to be ice cold. When things are ice cold, you drink them faster. That's why they always want American light lagers drank cold, because the colder they are, the less flavor there is, and the faster you're going to drink them. So it increases your consumption. When I'm having it, I want to get it a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still going to come out at 38, 39 degrees when it comes out of the tap, but as it sits in your hand, it's on the table. It warms up a little bit. Some of those flavors start to come out. And that's where we kind of go back to when we were talking about, the tasting beer as opposed to just going and drinking beer. And a lot of the ingredients that, craft breweries and the macro they make awesome beer and use top-notch ingredients. But for me, I feel like, the craft brewers, and especially like some of the great sours that come out now. If you ever want to fix your gut, I can give you a couple of sours that will really help you with, your gut microbiome.
Super fermented.
Some lactobacillus, acetobacteria, pediococcus. They naturally ferment those beers.
What's the fermenting time?
All depends. So if we're talking about a lager, because he brought it up, I think, today, and really there's only two kinds of beers.
Okay.
You're either really in a lager, which means you're a bottom bottom fermented beer that is using a lager yeast and fermented at a lower temperature for a longer period of time. Or you're an ale, which is a top fermented beer, which is fermented for a shorter period of time. Generally, lagers will take about 4 to 6 weeks, and ales, most people can turn those around in about 2 to 3. So when you talk about the craft breweries, they generally, when they start making beer to start with, they generally come out with a lot of ales because they can turn those things around in 2 weeks. They don't have a fermenter that they can let that beer just sit in there in 6 weeks and be like, hey, I'm just gonna brew beer, hang out, and wait 6 weeks before we open, and then come out with something else.
Gotcha. So is like Bud Light and Miller Lite, standard?
Those are all lagers. Yep. All the main the majority of the macro beers that you see out there are light lagers or some kind of lager beer.
Interesting. Okay, definitely did not know that. You already mentioned, so studies show that like drinking alcohol will decrease muscle recovery by about 34%. That's what they standardly say. In your experience, when you took out alcohol and you dropped a bunch of weight, did you notice recovery change at all? Obviously, you do have the factor that you were eating, calories were, in a bit of a deficit, sounded like.
I lost a lot of strength when I was going, through that, because it was like...
Just weight, just falling off. Yeah, okay.
And there's some water weight that you lose, but even if you have water weight, and I do believe in, that, when you're still lifting, you need that little bit of mass that really helps.
Yes.
To go through the workouts, to do that. It has nothing to do with alcohol, but you listen to Matt Frazier in one of his podcasts, he's like, when I go into the games, I try to get more body fat on because I know I'm going to need it over these next 5 or 6 days. And you're like, what? You want to get up to like 12%? He's like, yeah, that's where I have to be.
Yeah, just to be able to use those stores for those long multiple workouts in a day.
So it probably then comes down to like Gen Pop. They're not really having to be like, hey, you need to add a little bit extra on there. It's like if you're a serious athlete, like you said, you were training for regionals. It's a little different than someone who's like, I'm just trying to be a little more in shape.
Yeah, and it was definitely a difference, and it was fun to do, and I had kind of like you, I had somebody that I worked out with. He had a kid around Anthony's age, so we both had to come in early on Saturday mornings because kids had football and this, and it was fun to just go through and do. And I didn't make it to regionals but it was fun to just go through the process and having fun at it and just doing it together.
Yeah. Do you believe that a glass of wine at night is good for overall health?
No. I mean, that's like, well, that's like saying an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
I just
mean,
had
it's like,
to ask.
I mean, it's,
I also agree.
there's some polyphenols that are in wine that you're not gonna, I mean, there are some polyphenols in beer as well. Otherwise, I mean, yeah.
Oh, there really is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because you have to, I mean, when the proteins have to attach something for the yeast to eat it. Basically, yeast eats the sugars and it poops out CO2 and alcohol.
Yeah.
So it
We'll
has to
say
have some
produces. It sounds better.
protein. Okay, produces. Right? Right. But at the same time, you know, you have to have essential proteins in there for the yeast, the wheat, and the sugars to attach.
But there's just a larger amount in wine because there's definitely that marketing
Mm-hmm.
that, like, you know, glass of red wine. Granted, they also say it for the antioxidants, but yeah, we're not getting that many antioxidants.
But, okay, I mean, do regular grapes, and you're a nutritionist, have that many antioxidants in there?
No, you'd have to consume so much wine to have the benefits of the antioxidants you'd be getting from wine. You could just have an orange.
So, like, and I don't know a lot of things about, you know, the wine, but it takes 7 glasses of beer, or 7 glasses of water to make 1 glass of beer. So every time you have a 12-ounce bottle of beer, it takes 7 of those to make 1. Because when you're brewing the beer, you're going through a process. You have to heat it up. You have to sterilize it, because if you don't sterilize it, you know, there's bacteria in there. You have to make sure, you know, and that's how you take, you know, as they bring up the temperature, putting the wheat and everything in there. You're putting the wheat, the malts, and that's where you get your sugars. By heating all that stuff up, you got to make your hot liquor and get that mash. So, I mean, when you take a look at a glass of wine, I don't know what the ratio is, but you know, I don't know if it takes, you know, 3 pounds of grapes
Yeah,
to make 1 glass of wine, and what kind of
the ratio.
the ratios are.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about how much really goes into like these small things that we're just sitting.
Just sitting back and being like, oh, cool, I'm having this 3 ounces, but how many ounces did it take to make 3 ounces of that?
My favorite is when people are like, "Why do I pee so much when I drink?" I'm like, "You're drinking liquid." It's not rocket science, but it does.
The same person that's like, oh yeah, I'll have like 1 glass of water a day.
Yeah, those are my favorite. Not at all. So I know, at least from generalized, we know that it takes about 4 days for the body to truly remove alcohol from the liver and from like the gut microbiome. And we know that it disrupts the gut microbiome and all that good stuff. But you mentioned the fermenting. So from your knowledge point, how much is the fermenting bacteria overriding some of the negatives of what alcohol does in the body?
So I mean, all beer has bacteria. Yeast is a bacteria. There's different, you know, there's tons of different kinds of strains. For a local, like a craft beer or you know, a domestic light lager and things of that nature, you're not going to really get much out of that. It's usually a Saccharomyces style yeast. But if we're talking about like a traditional Belgium style sour, or what they would call like a lambic, where they're using some lactobacillus, some pediococcus, some of these things, and then when they put those in there and they inoculate the beer and they allow those bacteria to eat the sugars, it produces a little bit of extra yeast. And then when they bottle them, a lot of times they will do what's called bottle conditioning. So they'll put a touch of priming sugar in there, and then they'll put a little bit of yeast before they cap it. So that way it conditions the beer for a little bit of longer shelf life, but it will continually ferment.
Interesting.
You know, and these bacteria are what, in the aging time, are what, you know, really comes out with these nice Belgium style sours, which they'll be like, oh my gosh, it tastes like a beer that tastes like balsamic vinegar. But you know, there's so much artistry in being able to do those things year after year and having them taste the same. And you have these master blenders who are like, okay, blend 3/4 of the 3-year-old with 2/4 of the 1-year-old this year. Next year it might be 60-40, and they just do that by tasting it. And that's really where the artistry comes in. But they use, those kind of bacteria in there. I mean, there's one Brettanomyces, which, really just means British funk, because myces just means funk,
Yeah.
really. But it was found in a Belgian porter. But if you have too many beers with that, you can definitely get yourself cleaned out pretty quick.
Yes. On top of that is a diuretic, and it's gonna force your body, and then you're losing electrolytes. It's a great combination.
What is the shelf life on a lot of the beers? I know you're mentioning the yeast going in there to increase it. So, what is the shelf life on that? And is there a certain way that you have to store it in the meantime to try and maximize that?
So if you're talking about like a bottle conditioned beer, those ones can have a shelf life, up to 2, 3, even, some of them you can have even up to 5 to 10 years if you store them at the correct temperature.
Okay.
I am a firm believer. I mean, I know there's a lot of beer on warm shelves, but ideally having your beer stored cold, really maximizes its shelf life. It maximizes its freshness, just like you're talking about, food, vegetables. They say when you go to a grocery store, how do you store your vegetables? Well, where do you buy it at the grocery store? Because the grocery store doesn't want to throw food out.
Mm-hmm.
So they store it so it has its best shelf life. But for me, I think, generally, IPAs, because they have a little bit, they have hops in there, which, add a lot of aromas. The longer the beer sits, a little bit less of that, but there's other things that really go involved in the whole process of, how long it lasts, what style of beer it is. Light lagers can be up to, 6 months. But if you let them sit out in the sun you can take a beer, put it out like a beer, put it out in the sunlight for 10 minutes and pour that into a glass, and it's going to have a different flavor.
True. Is there a requirement when you got to throw it out if you have?
Yeah, there's breweries, they have code dates on them, and they have, an optimum freshness. They have, some of them do born on dates, some of them do expiration dates, but it's all up to the breweries on what they want to have it at. Do they want either one of those? Do they want it to be, 60 days, 90 days? Most of the beers, a lot of the beers that we carry that are out there, especially some of the IPAs, are usually 90 to 120 days.
So that's why it's so important to really make sure you only have a certain amount, just so you're not really knocking you out. So we're all CrossFitters. Have you noticed a trend in I feel like when I got into CrossFit, and granted, I worked as a nutritionist at a CrossFit gym, so a lot of people were like, it could have been just correlation of, okay, here's just someone working with me for nutrition, but they also drank a lot. But have you noticed the culture change, at least less into alcohol and less drinking? Or is it, I guess, depending on the level of athlete? What have you noticed?
I think it just depends on, the people and their, their surroundings.
Do you remember doing opens where your gym, everyone's just sitting there drinking after
Oh.
they just finished dying on the floor?
There were quite a few of them, and they did a competition, and it's not around anymore, but one of the first CrossFit gyms, and he's like, hey, the owner's like, hey, can you bring a few cans, cases of beer? I called my boss, I'm like, hey, any chance I can get some of these? He's like, all right. And a couple of people came over and they grabbed them and slammed them. I'm like, dude, that's 10%. You're going to be hammered. You just did a workout.
Yeah.
And I think, I think it just depends on the gym. I think it depends on the atmosphere, what the owners are, trying to do, what they're wanting to do with it. And I think it's also the age of the people too.
That's true.
Because I think part of it is there's the demographic that is more competitive. So it's like, all right, I'm going to cut out whatever's unnecessary. How do we optimize nutrition? And then there's also, I'd say you start to see people probably more typically 30s, 40s, where it's like, all right, am I really going to be pushing for a semifinals games or any of those high-end competitions, anything like that? Probably not. So it's, you work out to be able to enjoy things with the people around you. So I think a lot of it depends on the crowd. The other thing too is the last gym that we were at, they did a lot of, they had the Barbell Saves Project, which helped people in recovery. So for
Yes.
that gym, it was just like you don't show up with alcohol because there's a close affiliation with that and a lot of that. So just in
That's
our
true.
recent background,
that's-
part of it depends.
That's a great point.
I'm sure the area, yeah, like what is associated with, what's the area. I feel like there's less, and I'm encouraged by it, that it's not like a standard practice. But I definitely know plenty of people who, I'm like, if you just tried taking it out for a few days, you'd feel amazing. And then enjoy it. Like, I guess, what is your personal perfect balance with it? Because you still train hard and then drink.
I mean, it's
Individual dependent.
it's it's part of the craft beer industry is like a lot of a community aspect to it, and it's a small circle. When you look at the craft beer community, the accounts, the things that go on, next to how many places and spots are out there in the city of Phoenix, just in there, and it's so there's some of that, but when I go home, I really don't have alcohol in the house. My wife, I'm super proud of her. She's 6 months sober, so she doesn't drink. And then on the weekends, I I don't miss it when I have to go somewhere during the week or some work wise, and we'll do what we're doing out there. But I think
And by do what we're doing out there, that means Saturday he's not in the gym, and then Monday I see him. I'm like, "Hey, how are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, it was a rough time meeting with clients this weekend," because he puts in work out there.
See, I
haven't had any of those weekends since a couple of the festivals, but I don't. It's fun to just we the weekends are my time to spend it with the family. How right now, Dad's over there destroying the house and just he already destroyed
Rebuilding
it
it.
and then rebuilt it.
yeah.
It's all about how you say things. If they hear destroying, it's not good.
No, I'm sure it looks amazing. Yeah, I feel like from not drinking hardly at all, I really have to weigh the costs of like, how do I want to feel in training tomorrow? It's probably, yeah. I think that's pretty much all the questions I had.
All right, I think we hit the hour mark. So, couple quick questions before we close it out. What's the most impactful thing you've learned? Not just in the beer industry, or it could be in the beer industry, but what's the most impactful thing you've learned?
Most impactful. Culture is super important.
What's your favorite movie?
I know. It's a question.
Wow,
I can't answer it.
probably Gladiator. Still love watching that movie, even though I can't sit still and watch through the whole thing. Either Gladiator or Equalizer, the first one.
Equalizer.
Your first character strength that comes to mind?
Mighty Mouse? I don't know.
Wait.
First character strength. Well, you said a character. Oh my god.
I love that came.
Probably, I'm super loyal.
All right, scenario for you.
Okay.
A beer expires. Do you pour it out or dispose of it like Kid Rock with a 12 gauge?
Well, I'd probably pour it out because I don't have a 12 gauge like Kid Rock.
We could fix that.
Follow up. When's the last time you shotgun a beer?
When's the last time? It's been a while since I've shotgun a beer.
10 years plus or less?
Probably 10 years plus. No.
Someone
Probably
peer
about
pressure.
probably about 4 years ago when I was I shouldn't say we shotgunned a beer. I was on a trip back from San Diego with my boss, and we were on one of our excursions out there, and he was getting ready to get on his plane to San Francisco, and I was coming to Arizona, and we had a beer, and he's like, "Oh, I'll get us 2 more," and he's like, "Damn it, I do this every time." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "They just called last call for my flight." So he's like, "You ready?" I'm like, "All right," and we just down the beers. So that was probably the last time.
Where can people follow what you're doing or what the distributorship is doing right now?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Where can people follow what you guys are doing with the distributorship, or even personally, social media or website?
Definitely look on Scout AZ is our Instagram page. Don't look at mine. I really don't have a whole bunch of stuff on there. It's pretty boring. Just being honest on there. Go to Scout. What is it? Scoutdisc.com is our website. You can go ahead and you can take a look. Click under Arizona, see some of the brands we have. Those are two of the big things that we push out with our company and what we're doing.
Cool. All right, Hannah, what do you want to plug?
InsideOutNutritionUSA.com.
Cool. You can find what I'm doing with Cyto_building on Instagram. On X, it is Sledge in Office. And then until next time, I hope your hammer stays accurate. It's in the notes.
Oh, I'm supposed to read the notes.
Yep.
Let's see here. Oh, your macros are on track.
And your work blessed.
See you, everybody.